Okay, good evening and welcome, and thank you very much for attending this meeting, especially in view of the inclement weather. We've got a number of members, officers and co-opted members on remote, and we'll bring those people in as and when necessary. Can I request that mobile phones and other such equipment are switched to silent so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting? This meeting is a public meeting and is being live streamed for the public to view. And can I ask that when you wish to speak, you raise your hand and only speak when I indicate you can. Please ensure that your microphone is switched on and then switched off when you finish speaking. There's no fire test today, so if there's an emergency evacuation, we'll follow the instructions for the Town Hall staff and assemble in Tudor Square. I'm going to allow an addition to the agenda today because we've had some questions come in this afternoon, and I intend to take those as an urgent item following item 4 on the agenda, declarations of interest, and I'll explain the context of when we get there. Can I now move to a quick round of introductions for everybody in the room? For those who are attending remotely, you can introduce yourselves when you actually come into the meeting. I think that'll make things a bit smoother. So I'm Councillor Colin Ross, and I'm chair of today's meeting. Going around on my left.
David Hollis, Interim Director of Legal and Governance.
Chair Bell, Democratic Service Officer.
I'm Tom Hunt. I'm Councillor for Walkley Ward.
Simon Clement Jones, Councillor for Beecham and Greenhill Ward.
Ellie Senior Wadsworth, Head of HR.
I'm Councillor Gary Weatherall from the Shire Green and Brightside Ward.
Councillor Ben Curran from Walkley Ward.
Tony Kirkham, Interim Director of Finance.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Jay?
Yeah, Chair, received 2 apologies from one from Councillor Audit, Councillor Angela Argenzio and Councillor Kevin Oxley.
Okay, item 3 is declarations of interest. Has any member got any declaration of interest on any items of the agenda? And I take silence as there are no declarations of interest. Thank you. Okay, now the urgent item. The Constitution states that public questions are to be a standing item on the agenda at policy committees, but other boards, and this is one such other board, can accept questions at the chair's discretion. We've had actually questions come in this afternoon very late, all on the same topic, basically around the trees inquiry that was published on Monday, and I decided, as this is a matter of high public interest and because of the timescales, the report only being published on Monday, I would allow this as an urgent item. Now, I think we've had 3 separate questions, but to be frank, they are basically all about the same topic. But we've got one person here in public to answer the question, so can I ask Annette to come to the microphone and pose her question, please? Right, will you wait till you sit down and then put the microphone on? Because the webcast then focuses on you.
Okay. I hope that the other two questions, other two people's questions will also be read out so that we're actually aware of them. I've got a number of questions actually, and I'll try and be as brief as I possibly can, and I'll try and remove all the context as I'm going along, which is rather difficult. I suppose my first question is, I would like to know if this committee are satisfied that the CEO and the leader of the council have done an adequate job in responding to the report. I've seen that they've said they've changed the culture. They haven't acknowledged that the change to the committees or the ending of the strong leader or the cooperation across and so on, are actually not things that were done as an act of contrition. They were done because other people in Sheffield demanded them. There were fantastic, enormous efforts by local people to collect signatures, to force you to have a referendum and to win that referendum to change the way that this council works. So my first question to you is, are you satisfied by the people who you appoint to represent you in the media? Because I have to tell you that I'm in contact with very many people in this city now, and they are absolutely appalled. We're also hugely appalled that this committee, which purports to be, you know, like about overseeing risk assessment and high standards and codes of conduct, and has auditors, hasn't actually managed, as far as I can see and as far as other people can see, to identify the issues that are referred to in Sir Mark's 277-page report, or do anything about them, or address them. I have friends who have got criminal records, and I have got people who have had to raise tens of thousands of pounds because they stopped the trees being felled. And now we have a report that says that from day one, the contract was flawed. The report that you misinterpreted was the cause of the problem, and it went on for 4 years. And if you'd like to talk to me about what it did to me and what it did to other people, then I'd be more than happy to give you the benefit of my experience. So why haven't those issues been identified since this committee was set up? When Sir Mark Lowcock comes in from outside the city, looks at the paperwork and writes the most damning report about the way that the city is run. We deserve better. And then you knew when the report was coming out, and I really don't expect that you thought you were going to get a big bunch of flowers, a kiss and a thank you very much. So why hasn't this committee organised an urgent meeting to receive that report and to respond to it as a committee? And when is the full council going to address it? When are they going to discuss it? When are they going to accept it? When are they going to thank Mark Lowcock for his hard work? When are you going to look at the recommendations? And crucially, when are you going to start actioning them, and how? Those are the most important issues to me. But if the council bureaucracy is so slow moving and nothing's happening, then I draw your attention to the fact that 5 members of this council can ask the Lord Mayor to call an extraordinary meeting, and if that isn't done within 7 days, then those 5 members can call it. So I'm calling on you to do that, and we're just about to enter a period of purdah. And if this is all that's going to happen as a report of the most damning nature you could possibly imagine, please, please, let me tell you now, there is outrage out there, and you are going to have to suffer the same consequence again, because we used the right channels, we used all the right channels for 4 years, and all that worked was actually putting our bodies in the way and making you stand up and listen. Is that what you want us to do again? Or are you going to address the questions that we're asking and actually do something about them? You brought Sheffield into shame. We are a laughingstock internationally. You were told by international experts that what you were doing was completely wrong. And for 4 years, people stuck their fingers in their ears, were arrogant and refused to listen. And we have paid the consequences of that, not you. And it's about time you took responsibility for it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions.
Those were my questions as I was going along. Do you want me to go back through them?
No, I said thank you for your question. I'm saying turn your microphone off. Okay, trying to address those questions. First of all, in the thrust of some of the questions, there's been a misunderstanding of the role of the Audit Committee. We are not the ones who institute proceedings against individual members, and it would be entirely wrong of us to do so, because going through the standard procedure, we are the final arbiters by subcommittees of this Audit Committee that make the final judgment. Therefore, we can't be judge and jury, as it were, on the same affair. So that addresses is one point. The second point about adequate job that the CEO and leader have done. The new CEO obviously is new and post the trees situation anyway. I can't actually speak for the leader and his position. You realise that this is actually a cross-party committee, and I'm not in the same political party as the leader, and actually I was one of the people who were standing under trees during when all this was going on, and I so empathise with your position on this. And again, so we as a council have received the report on Monday and are considering how we should respond to it as a council and a body. You will have seen the statements and interviews that were conducted with Kate Josephs and the leader, Councillor Terry Fox, on Monday and Tuesday, and we need time to consider these findings, including what role this committee and auditors will have if we're ensuring that as an organisation and the city fully learn from this and are able to move forward. We recognise that there may be many legitimate questions from people, the public and elected members, and we've had that demonstrated adequately today, and we have to commit to make time to make sure that those are answered adequately and fully and in a considered way, and having it just 3 days to consider it isn't really long enough to give a concise answer. As you pointed out, we're about to go into election purdah period, and quite frankly, this is an emotive political subject, and therefore it would be wrong and would be stifle the debate on this if it was taken place during the purdah period because of the protocols that enhance that. So this is likely to be after the local elections have taken place. What is clear is that there have been some serious errors of judgment, and we've apologised unequivocally for those, we being the council, for those, and we will be making fuller and personal apologies in due course. Since these events, there have been significant changes in the leadership of the organisation, specifically in the chief executive and senior officer roles, and our approach and behaviours and values have also changed. Although it will take some time to become the council we want to be, and that the people of Sheffield deserves, we've already put in place a number of changes that will help us to avoid making this mistake in the future. So I hope that answers most of your points. It's probably not the answer that you wanted, but I'm afraid it's the answer I'm going to have to give. And I've allowed as an urgent question. I have given the answer that I'm going to give to this, and as I say, I have taken this at the time. The other questions were on a similar vein, but actually as they named specific people, David, can you just point out the legalities on this, because they name specific people?
We wouldn't normally read them out if they name people. What we will do is put them within the minutes with the suitable amendments, and so that the questions and your answer will go in the minutes.
Thank you. And just to reiterate for members of the public, I'm speaking. Just to reiterate that these questions were on very similar lines and raising the same issues that Annette's questions have done there. You will have to put your microphone on.
Yes, I have quite a loud voice. I'm sorry, I'm an ex-teacher, so I expect to project. I'd like ask you to look at Ruth's questions again, please. Ruth's question 3 is asking about a complaint that was made in November 2020 about conduct that has still not been addressed, and it was conduct in this room. It's still not been addressed.
As I've said,
it's about the conduct of councillors.
Switch your microphone off, please.
Is it this one again?
As I said, procedures are in place. If there was a specific complaint lodged in that incident in November full council that was referred to in the question, it will have gone through the procedures. If no complaint was made, nothing will have happened, and it would be up to a member of the public or a member of the council, another elected member, to make the complaint. If no complaint was made, nothing would have happened. And as far as I'm aware, actually no complaint was made about that incident. No, as far as I'm aware, no formal complaint was made about that incident. Okay, thank you very much. We're now moving on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which in your pack are pages 9 onwards. Are there any comments on this minutes of the previous meeting, or can I accept them as a true record? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And there's no matters arising, I take it, from those minutes. Okay, item 6 is the statement of accounts, which is the very weighty document that we have in front of us. And Tony and Ruth, I believe you're going to present this.
Just briefly from me, Chair. As you say, these are the accounts of the council. You saw them previously at draft stage. Obviously, we've been working with the external auditors to look at issues raised as part of their audit, and we're now presenting a complete view in relation to our response to that audit and a further set of accounts which we are hoping that we can sign off at this stage. I don't know whether Ruth wants to highlight any of the particular changes which we've made as part of that process.
I'll start, if that's okay. So as Tony says, we're here today to update you on the statement of accounts process and request approval of the 21-22 accounts. These financial statements close the cycle of the 21-22 year and report in full the council's financial position for that year. The accounts have now been subject to external audit, which is almost concluded, and the final amendments to the accounts are complete and ready for you to approve. Once approval is given, the Chair and the Section 1.5 officer, Tony, will sign both the statement of accounts and the letter of representation. This is a letter from the Council to Ernst and Young, our auditors, to provide assurance that we have fully disclosed everything required of us and complied with all the necessary legislation and guidance so that they can issue their opinion. The signing will take place at a date after the meeting, once EY have confirmed that the external audit inspection is complete. Closing the accounts at the year end is a complex council-wide collaboration. It's a team effort to deliver this process, so our thanks to everyone involved, and especially to Ruth and her team and our wider finance colleagues. I'll hand over to Ruth now to take you through the report in more detail.
Hi, Ruth Matheson from Finance Manager of Financial Accounting Team. So just to recap from when we brought the unaudited accounts to the 28th of July meeting last year, the accounts have now been subject to audit by Ernst & Young. We brought the report back to the 28th of July 2022 committee last year. Members have been through that and asked various questions at various stages whilst we kept the committee up to date. As well, we arranged the independent trainer as it ended last year that provided the opportunity for members to raise questions. Ernst & Young have commenced their audit October last year and have been preparing the report for you with their findings and recommendations, which they'll take you through in further detail after this item. So to summarise, from the unaudited version that came to committee last to the version that you've now got today, there are 4 main areas that have changed. So the main one is Highways PFI refinance scheme. So at the end of last financial year, the Highways PFI contract with Amy was refinanced. We took that as an upfront gain rather than an annual reduction in the unitary charge, and that gain totaled £14 million. This was split equally between the council and the Department for Transport. At the time, we presented that as all deferred revenue. But as the Department for Transport shows effectively their grant funding in advance, an audit adjustment's been made where we've agreed with the auditors to amend the balance sheet from 100% deferred revenue to now show 50% deferred revenue and 50% grant received in advance. The second main adjustment was for infrastructure. So infrastructure assets are currently held on our balance sheet at depreciated historical costs, and we remove any assets when they've been fully depreciated. How these assets are accounted for is an ongoing sector-wide issue. So as an interim measure, the government's issued a statutory instrument with temporary provisions alongside the additional code guidance from SIPA. As a result, we've taken the opportunity to write off 138.7 million under the statutory instrument, where we've reasonable assurance that the assets have since been replaced, most notably under the highways PFI contract. The value of infrastructure assets in the draft accounts was 773.5 million and have now reduced to 634.8 million. The third area of audit adjustment has been the Dwellings Housing Price Index. So we hold the council housing stock on our balance sheet, and it's valued using the Housing Price Index, and that was done using the index available at the time. As more information becomes available, the index updates, and the adjustment reflects the movement in the index from the unaudited accounts last May. So the most recent HPI figures in February this year created a downward movement of 20.4 million to council dwellings. Now, the final area of audit adjustment is on council tax prepayments. In the unaudited accounts, the council tax prepayment was incorrectly netted off against debtors and instead should have been recognised as a creditor. Therefore, an adjustment of 3.9 million was made to increase debtors and to increase creditors to correct the presentation. We understand that EY are going to issue an unqualified opinion in both the accounts and the value for money conclusion. EY are currently finalising their audit and any outstanding queries in their partner review. And in addition, we'll be waiting on the whole of government accounts return that will need to complete at the end of this month. So EY will take you through their detailed audit results report and any recommendations they have. But we're happy to take questions on the statement of accounts now, or we're happy to take questions at the end once EY presented their audit results report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've just been informed that the webcast isn't working. Some people who ask public questions might think that's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but we'll do it. It will be available. The recording is fully intact. The recording, I've been assured, is fully intact, so people will be able to access it later. Okay, are there any questions on these statement of accounts? Okay, sorry, I can't hear. Well, no, the two separate items, and we've got recommendations of this, then there's the EY report after that.
Well, I think it was suggested, did you want to hold back the questions on this because obviously they
Okay, well, we'll move on to... There are three recommendations on item 6, but if the committee would prefer to hear the EY audit accounts before agreeing these recommendations, I'm perfectly happy to do that. Or do we want to agree the three recommendations now and then move on to the EY? Okay, the recommendations are that the Audit and Standards Committee approves the statement accounts for 21-22 as set out in the appendix, subject to the finalisation of the audit requiring no further changes. Notes in accordance with the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015, the Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee will sign a statement of accounts for 21-22 on conclusion of the audit by Ernst & Young. Notes the letter of management representations to be submitted to the external auditor is on the basis set out in the report, and this will be signed by the Director of Finance and Commercial Services and the Chair of the Audit and Standards Committee. Can we agree those recommendations? Agree. Okay, can I also thank all the officers throughout the council who've been party to producing this very weighty nearly 200 pages document, which was required bedtime reading for all members of this committee. Lack of questions is partly because we've got the Ernst and Young report coming up, but also we have seen these as drafts and as pertinent questions on them, and as has been pointed out, the 4 changes don't affect materially the statement of accounts. So I just wanted to make that clear, that we weren't just nodding these through without any inquiring mind. Okay, can we now go on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the Ernst & Young one. So Dan Smiller and Hayley Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, just to introduce myself, so I'm Hayley Clark. I am a partner at EY. What I'll do is I will just give a bit of a summary of where we are, and then I'm just going to hand over to Dan just to go over a few areas for you. So you have received our report. We aren't planning to go through it in a huge amount of detail, mainly because it's a slightly longer version of the status update that you received just a few weeks ago. So what Dan will do is he'll touch on the key changes in the report and areas that we need you to focus on for the purpose of this meeting. As Claire and Ruth have mentioned, we do have a number of procedures that we are still closing out as part of the audit, and we've included a status update at the time of drafting this report on page 5 of our report. So subject to the completion of those procedures, I'm not anticipating an unqualified opinion, but I do want to obviously just caveat that until those procedures are complete, there is a risk of further adjustments arising. The other element that I just wanted to highlight, and I know we spoke about this at the last committee meeting, but it's not explicitly mentioned in the report, is we obviously spoke about the risk around the triennial review and what that presented in terms of the timeline. I have had some communications from colleagues today that there is an imminent SIPA bulletin due out in relation to that. We haven't got sight of what that entails at the moment and what that's going to say. So we do just need to keep a close eye on that and analyse whether that is going to have any impact on these financial statements if it's released before we sign. But as I say, it is imminent. So there is a degree of risk attached to that I do just want to make the committee aware of. But we'll have to deal with that as and when it arises. So what I'll do now, if that's okay, is I will just hand over to Dan, who will just guide us through some of the changes from the last report that you saw.
Thanks, Hayley. So, yeah, the previous report that we presented on the 16th of February had a lot of the narrative that you see in today's report, but what it didn't have was some of the details around errors. So I just want to, it's quite a negative aspect to look at, but kind of update you on some of the errors that weren't in the previous report. So page 9 is the first risk area that we set out in the report around risk of management overrider controls. And we've highlighted a small error there that is essentially just part of the calculation was missing, and it unfortunately crept over our reporting threshold. But we do then go on to say that we don't think that is symptomatic of anything to do with the risk of fraud. It's just that we report it in that area. On page 10, that is another one about a significant risk in relation to fraud. And once again, we just set out some of the errors that we're reporting in that area, mainly around double counting of income and expenditure, and also one other error that had an impact but on both sides. So management haven't adjusted for those once again, we can report that they're not indicative of fraud, but say have come out in that area. Likewise on page 11, so say impacted income and expenditure. So that is just the other side of those errors. And also we identified a small number of items that hadn't been accrued for during the close down. Once again, not indicative of error, just over our reporting threshold. And the one of the big areas where we've spent a lot of time this year is on infrastructure assets, and we went through that when we presented our plan and our report in February. So the slides 12 and 13 just summarise that work, and hopefully the fact that we've split it over 2 slides does really show you the value for money that you've got. That we couldn't even fit all of our conclusions onto one slide. There were so many. There are some recommendations in that area, and as Ruth indicated, there's been quite a sizable write-off that impacts not the general fund but the capital adjustment account, and we've given that the ticks as we've gone through that. Page 14 and 15 are some of the more detail on issues that we spoke about at the last report, where we said that our specialists had identified some areas of reporting on PPE, so property, plant and equipment. Now that is split in our report dependent on the valuation method of the assets involved. So page 14 shows the assets that were valued as fair value. So that's either an income approach or a market value approach. The biggest error that we've identified is in relation to car parks. So one of the parameters that your valuation team have disagreed with our specialists on is just around the yield that's been used, and unfortunately, just as a result of the size of that error, it just extrapolates out to, I think, put 5.6 million there. But so that's just really a difference of opinion between our valuers and your valuers, so that just sets out there. And on page 15 is just where there is a replacement cost method, and management have adjusted for all the issues that we've identified in that area. So there's nothing specific that I want to mention there. Just going through the report, then page 26 sets out some of the narrative of the adjustments that have been made by management, and page 27 sets out the impact on both the CIES and the balance sheet of the adjustments that haven't been made by management. So we'd probably just ask as a committee that you're comfortable with everything that's on that slide, and we can obviously take questions, or Ruth and Claire and Jane can answer any questions as well on anything in particular that you're not sure on, because as a committee, Colin and Tony will be signing off the letter of rep, and this report on page 27 is appended to that letter of representations. So we just ask that you are comfortable with what's on there. Page 37 onwards identifies our control recommendations, so that there are quite a few in there, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on what's in there. However, just to point out the 2 on the first page that we've indicated are red in terms of our RAG rating. So one of those is on PPE, and just kind of summarises some of the issues that we've faced this year, and why that links to some of the errors that we've reported in section 4. And then the next one we've highlighted to you as a committee, because I know it's been discussed before, just around related parties. So I think I'd just say that there's probably still work to be done from what we've discussed before as a committee, but the findings in themselves this year are not particularly concerning. Just say we've indicated as red just because there still is work to be done from the position when we've last presented at the committee, because say no, it was discussed then. There are some recommendations linked to infrastructure as well. We've put those as green, not because it's not a significant issue, just because there's quite a bit of time for management to consider those. The temporary relief that's been introduced by the statutory instrument runs until 24-25, so say it does give management a bit of time to look at those. The previous 2 audits that we've audited have gone on a bit longer or later than desirable, and that did mean that finance didn't have enough time to kind of implement some of our prior year recommendations. So that's why in the recommendations section at the end of that, we've got 2 sets of prior recommendations that we've given an update against. So just in case you're wondering why there's so many that we report against there. So that was just to give finance a proper stab at being able to implement those, and hopefully you can see in there that they're broadly either kind of merged with something that we're already reporting or have been closed down. And then page 59 is the last page that I want to draw your attention to, and that's just the sensitive matter of our indicative fee for the audit. So I'll close my, if you can call it a presentation there. I like to have slides, but you just get to look at my face instead. If you want to have any questions, happy for myself or Hayley to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Dan and Hayley. Members, are there any questions on this Ernst Young report? Simon.
Thank you, and thank you very much for this report. And it's always confusing, these things, because obviously it's difficult to work out what's real and what isn't to some degree. You know, sometimes you know, you look at big numbers and it's about a revaluation. So I suppose my question is there anything in this in the accounts that would have actually had or has had an impact on the bottom line in terms of services, in terms of, I don't know, so I mean, if we're restating the amount of capital we have, you know, has that been material on the amount of capital we have in reserves or going forward, that sort of thing, and say in terms of the scale of anything that you have found. Thank you.
I'll take that one. So Simon, on page 27, I think it is. So the effects on the current period, we split it into 2 columns. So you know, I think, to use your terminology, not anything that we find in the auditing standards or the accounting standards, but if we say that the furthest left column is the unreal, and then the second column is the real impact. So you've kind of got the pensions and the PPE type differences. So that's the stuff where the pension fund auditor has reported an issue in what they've audited, and we take that back and consider how that impacts Sheffield's accounts. And then the PPE stuff that I've spoken about as well. So that second column is the more, as you say, real impact, so the stuff that hits the services and the bottom line. So the majority or the bigger figures of that, you'll see that impacts both sides. So that's the 5.2 million. So they've been the bigger errors that we found, and they impact equally. So there's no impact on the bottom line or what the impact would be on council taxpayers. But there are some errors that haven't been adjusted for that could. Now you can see that we've got a £1.4 million figure at the bottom of that. So it kind of means really that some of the errors that we found cancel out some of the other errors when it comes to what the bottom line is. But also happy to say that none of them are individually that significant. We've got quite a small reporting threshold of 1.4 million that to you and me would obviously be a lot of money, but to a council that's spending 1.8 billion, you know, it's actually quite a small figure for us to report to. So obviously it's for you to determine whether you think that there's a sizable impact, and everybody will have a different materiality when they look at these accounts. But say that I think that second column is the one that you want to look at for, say, the real impact of the errors that we've identified.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Tom?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Dan and Hayley, for your work on this. I just wondered if, now that the audit process is nearly complete, whether you could sort of almost take a step back and think, is there anything that Sheffield City Council could have done differently to make this a smoother process for you? Are there points of learning that you would suggest? I mean, there's an awful lot in the report, but you know, broadly, are there points of learning that you would advise this authority to take on board for future audits?
Good question. You know, you're a large, complex organisation, and there are always going to be certain things that come up every year. We have a standard run a debrief session after every audit, and we'll continue to do that because absolutely, as you can see from the report, yes, we have raised some observations for you to take away and consider as an organisation, but it's also an opportunity for us to reflect on what we need to also look at and do differently from an audit perspective as well. I think, you know, as an organisation, you have historically had a very well-run finance team, and you know, it's nice to see lots of, you know, familiar faces that are coming through year on year, and this is obviously my 4th year on the audit as well, so you've had quite a lot of continuity. Obviously you've had some changes this year, not only in the finance team but as an you know, a more senior leadership level as well, and I think with that, you know, there always comes with it a period of uncertainty and change, and I suppose it's just being aware of that and thinking about how you navigate through that as an organisation. However, you know, there's nothing that I've come across so far that would lead me to say that that's not being done appropriately. You know, we've documented in the VFM section, obviously, that you know, we haven't identified any significant weaknesses in the arrangements you have in place, but that is clearly one area as an organisation that you do need to keep a very firm grasp on as you go forward in the medium term. Budgetary constraints are only growing, and the ability for organisations of your size to identify and achieve savings in a short period of time are quite challenging. And whilst you know, you have a level of reserves at the moment, that doesn't make that an immediate issue. Once those are spent, they are spent, and it's highly unlikely that you would be able to recover those up to the levels you've now got. So those are probably a couple of the areas that I would encourage some continued focus on. That's not to say it's not there already, though.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no further questions. Can I reiterate the thanks of Councillor Tom Hunt made to you and the team, both of you and the team at Ernst Young in producing these accounts. And basically the summary of them is that they're not totally finalised, but assuming in the minor items that are still to be signed off in the next few days, there aren't any major surprises, we will be able to have an unqualified judgment at the end of this process, which is always a very good thing to have for the accounts. So that's a good judgment. There are no recommendations with this, but I propose that we just say that we accept the report and reaffirm the ability of myself as chair of the committee and Tony Kirkham as the senior officer involved to sign the management letter and so forth, hopefully 10 days or so time when it's all signed out, and definitely before any surprises come in from any government agencies that might impact on what we're doing. Is everybody happy with that process? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, the final substantive item on the agenda is item 8, the whistleblowing policy. So, Lise, this is yours.
Thank you, Chair. So the whistleblowing policy, as you all will be very aware, is an important policy that all organisations of our size and nature need to have in order to give employees a safe passage to make disclosures that might require them to have some degree of protection or anonymity. We have a policy that's been in place since 2018 called See It, Say It, and the last time this discussion was had at Audit Committee, there was an agreement to review that policy, which we've now done. The number of complaints that we have under that policy is very low, so an average of 1 a year. We receive more, but they don't progress to the investigation stage. The reason being one of two things. One, there's not sufficient actionable evidence, or that they don't meet the criteria of whistleblowing. Whistleblowing has to be used in particular criteria and circumstances. So the very low number could be taken as a really positive indicator as an organisation that there are adequate recourse measures in place for people to raise concerns, and that we are well run and we've got our eye on the ball in terms of fraud prevention. However, it's probably healthy to have a degree of professional curiosity about that low number. And we are, as we've just heard in the finance item, we're a complex organisation. There are a range of different possibilities for fraudulent activity. So we are actually seeing an increase in complaints through employee channels because we are working on our employment culture. So it is interesting and perhaps curious that we're not seeing an increase of complaints through the whistleblowing procedure. The review of the procedure, it is factually accurate, it is adequate in terms of its function. It could be written more clearly, which is certainly an action that we will follow up on. But how we communicate the policy and how we make sure that people understand what it's there for and how to use it is probably the more important element of this. So in April, we are, as a HR service with corporate leadership team, doing some work on performance and accountability. So there will be a natural opportunity to position this within that. I think what we would like to do that's slightly different is we would like to look at how we manage the communication in a way that means that it's not a top-down message, that it's a contextually relevant message in our services so that the local context can be explained in parallel to the policy so that it's not a dry corporate policy. We do have corporate support in place around contact advisors who are there to give people advice if they think they may have a whistleblowing complaint. We haven't maintained the number of contact advisors and we need to do more to equip them and train them to do that, to discharge that responsibility well. So there are a few recommendations. One is that we should do some benchmarking with core cities to find out what is a typical number of whistleblowing complaints and what are the nature of those whistleblowing complaints. We'll rewrite the policy so that it's a bit crisper, cleaner, easier to understand, but no substantive changes are recommended within that. And we would launch that with some communication in April, but looking at highlighting the use and the application of the policy locally within services rather than it being a corporate message. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And following the two very chunky reports, it was lovely to have a two-page report to read through. So a special thank you for that. Members, are there any questions on this? Tom.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. I think it's right to, as you say, be professionally curious about that low number. You know, it's vital that any organisation has a strong whistleblowing policy, but I think the events of the last few days have certainly meant that that is of utmost importance. I just wondered, in the context of the work now to embed a new policy and to make sure that it's as widely understood and available to staff as possible, will there be consultation with the staff trade unions and also with the equalities team to see if there's any particular reasons why groups of the workforce may not feel as able to come forward as others? So I think perhaps getting their perspectives could be useful, but I'd welcome your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Thank you. We have a fairly well-established process for when we make any changes to policies, especially policies that form a formal part of our terms and conditions as employees. So when you start, you get a pack that you need to read and understand, and the whistleblowing policy is part of that. So any change to that, although we're not changing the nuts and bolts of it, the fact that we want to make it easier, it's really important that we engage our trade unions because they don't want to see their members having to use the whistleblowing procedure. So making sure that it sits cleanly within a suite of other policies is really important to them as well. So they would absolutely be part of that. One of the things that the trade unions are really excellent at is challenging us and making sure that we write things that people will read and understand. So they've got members from senior managers to frontline workers, and they will know whether something's going to read well. So it's a really important sounding board. In terms of qualities, we don't currently have a built-in part of our policy procedure, but for reasons I think we all know well, so the Race Equality Commission, we are looking at doing far more staff engagement with our minoritised groups around the organisation. And we have just started a process of engagement with all of our networks to involve them in some of our workforce policies. So this would potentially be a good opportunity to do this. We have got some work planned around dignity and respect, which is naturally a very important policy for those who might experience harassment and bullying. There is a link to whistleblowing there. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There's three recommendations that all seem entirely sensible to me, that we benchmark with core cities on numbers and the nature of whistleblowing complaints to address the complacency issue, rewrite the policy so no substantive changes, launch with the communications in April, again to make sure that all members of staff are aware of it and highlight it, and local communication to highlight local delivery context. And they're all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. And the final item on the agenda, substantive item on the agenda, is the work programme, page 19 to 28 in your packs. Are there any comments on this? Clearly we've gone through the 9th of March meeting agenda and we have things there for the 13th of April meeting, and then things scheduled, routine things scheduled, and other things into the next municipal year cycle. Any comments on that? No? Okay, well that links in very nicely with the date of the next meeting, and there are schedule items to be taken, so there will be a meeting on the 13th of April in the council chamber. Thank you very much, and a safe journey home, said with more feeling than usual today. Safe and swift as possible journey home, I think I should say. And to all those looking in from home, we are very envious. So, goodbye.